What is the secret to writing catchy melodies that just stick in your head? You know, the ones you can't forget and keep humming, even though you actually hate them? Well, in this video, I'm going to break down and analyze 3 insanely catchy melodies from hook creating geniuses, see if there are any commonalities, and then use those secrets to create an original catchy melody from scratch. Well, that's the plan anyway. We'll see how successful I am. But first things first, what is the melody? And I know that sounds like a simple question, but if we don't understand this fully, we could be making huge mistakes in our own music because the secrets lie in the simplicity. Okay, Wikipedia describes a melody as being a sequence of single notes that is musically satisfying. So, not a chord. And not a harmony. Easy, right? Well, this is the important part. A sequence of single notes consists of 3 things. Rhythm, pitch, and timbre. Now, timbre is just a fancy word for the tone of a sound. So a middle C on a piano sounds different from a middle C played on a bell. So straight away, let's take timbre off the table. Because if you've written an amazingly catchy melody, it's going to sound great on just a simple guitar or a piano or just singing along. One of the biggest mistakes I see producers making is getting so caught up with a really cool synth preset they've found that they get distracted from focusing on the elements that really matter to make a truly catchy and memorable melody: the rhythm and the pitch. Now, you might completely disagree as to how catchy you think these melodies are, so if you do, let me know in the comments, what do you think is the catchiest melody ever written, and maybe we can pick that apart on the channel as well. Okay, let's do it. Now, I specifically chose 3 different genres of music in which to analyze these melodies to show you that these concepts are universal. I've noticed these patterns across all catchy music. So here are the 3 melodies as normal, and then we're going to remove the pitch and just listen to the rhythm. But first, let's listen to them through. You'll recognize this. We'll just play that through once. Here's the second melody. And here's the third melody for my dance music fans, sped up to the same speed as the other 2. Okay, so that's all 3 melodies played normal. Now let's strip out the pitch and focus just on the rhythms. And to do that, I'm going to take all of the notes and just put them on the root note of the scale we're working in, which, as I've transposed all of these melodies, is going to be A. So now we can focus just on the rhythm from Blinding Lights, and I want you to listen really carefully and see if you can notice anything. Okay, so what did you notice from that? I'll let you know in a minute, but now let's listen to the other 2 melodies and do exactly the same thing. So next is the Coldplay track, and let's just move everything to the root of the key, which is the A. So here we go. And now we'll do exactly the same for the Avicii melody. So let's move everything to the root of the track. I'll put the tempo to the original track for this, and now let's listen. Okay, so what do you notice? Focusing on just the rhythm of all 3 melodies, we can really hear there's a repetition of the rhythmic motif. And this is so important for having a melody stick in your listener's head, a repetition of the rhythm. See anything similar? Well, this rhythmic pattern repeats, this rhythmic pattern repeats, and this rhythmic pattern repeats. Okay, so what can we take from this? You guessed it, repetition of rhythm is key. Okay, so let's add the pitch back into each of these melodies, and there are 4 things I want you to listen out for here. Try and listen out and guess them all before I reveal them, and just rewind and pause if needs be. Okay, so back to Blinding Lights. We're listening out for the pitch now, remember? And have a look at what's happening within the MIDI on the piano roll editor as well. That's a clue. Next, Viva La Vida. And I've turned the chords off now to make it easier. This bit's important. And now for the last one, Levels by Avicii. This one makes it a bit easier to see what's going on. Okay, so let's compare them and see what secrets we can find. Well, firstly, the one I hope you got was that there's a repetition of pitch shape as well as a repetition of rhythm. So we're seeing the same pitch shapes repeated several times throughout each melody, again to make it more memorable. Just in general, think about what makes something memorable to you. It's simple and it repeats. Now, before we get to the next point, I want to just touch upon the notion of motifs. If you think of a motif as a short musical logo, then you can use a motif several times throughout a melody, which is going to make it more memorable. It's kind of like going to McDonald's and seeing the logo in different places. It sticks in your mind and it's something that you can relate to. Now, like the broader melody, a motif consists of both rhythm and pitch. And if we split our melodies into different sections, it's easier to identify these motifs and how they repeat. So I've split this first melody into sensible and appropriate repeating sections. We got A, and we've got B. So they're almost like two different motifs. Then we go back to A and play that motif again. And then back to B. So we're going A, B, A, B. If we look at Viva La Vida, again, we've got an A section. Then it repeats the A section. So it's a different order from the first melody. Then we've got a B section, but we can see the rhythmic motif continues. Still got the same rhythm. And then we go to the C, which is different again. But we can still see where there are repetitions of both rhythm and pitch shape. And for levels, that's a bit simpler. We've just got an A section, then a B section, and it repeats. And really the only difference is that we go down here instead of maintaining on that note. A, B, A, B. So that was a bit of a sidebar, but if you can conceptualize your melodies in this way, splitting it into A, B, C, and D sections, or maybe even just A and B sections, it's going to make constructing these patterns easier. Okay, so back to the next point. If everything stays on the same level the whole time, it's going to get boring and you're not going to be invested. So we've got a notion called the hero's journey. And a really good example of this is in Viva La Vida. So we've got the repetition of pitch shape, but then we go up about 3/4 of the way through the melody before going back home at the end. And if you think about your favorite movies and books, this is a fairly common structure. You'll have maybe 3/4 or 2/3 of the film going from where the hero starts before everything culminates just before the end of the movie, and then we've got the resolution and the conclusion. And if you think about melodies that way, that's why a lot of melodies will do that. So in Viva La Vida, we've got the first phrase, which we could call A, then we've got B, then back to A, then back to B, then we go up to C. The rhythm's kind of repeating before we come back down again for the resolution and the conclusion. Nice, huh? Now, tied into this hero's journey concept is the notion of stepwise and leapwise. And that's really to do with the intervals of pitch between each note. For example, in levels, we can see we've got this rundown of notes, like so, and that would be called stepwise. But then here, we go for a big jump, and that's called leapwise. Now, in most melodies, there's going to be a lot more stepwise than there is leapwise. Imagine going on a journey and climbing up a hill and descending a hill, rather than suddenly and randomly jumping all over the place. Remember, that's not to say you can't use leapwise. It's just generally speaking, it's going to be used less than the stepwise intervals. There we go, stepwise, stepwise, and a leap. And then in Viva La Vida, most of it's stepwise, but you've got a couple of leaps here, just to add extra tension and excitement. The third secret is, if you think about when you sing along to a melody, there's only so much you can do with your human voice unless you're Pavarotti or some incredible singer. So all of these melodies fall within just 1 octave, or maybe 1.5 octaves maximum. So if we look at Blinding Lights, we've got the lower A there, which is our lowest note. And then we've got 1 octave above, which is this A here. And in fact, if we put it in scale mode, so it's only showing those notes from within the key of A minor, we can see that's the root note and that's the root note. And the entire melody falls within that. So it's easy to sing along. Now, let's have a look at Viva La Vida. Again, we've hit scale mode. We've got the lowest note here, which is the B, and we've got the highest note here, which is the B. So again, it's all happening within just one octave. If we look at levels, we have got the lowest note is the G, and then the highest note is the A. Okay, so that is just over one octave, but it's well within that safety range of an octave and a half. And the last point I want to make about pitch is the notion of chord notes. Now, if I select the chords from Blinding Lights and then select the melody as well, we can see that a lot of the notes used in the melody are actually from the chords themselves. And if we move them all down an octave to the range of the chords, we can see they actually overlap a lot. Specifically strong notes in a melody that relate to the chords would be the first, the third, and the fifth. So if we put this down, we can see that the D is the first note in the chord. Then on the second one, it's hitting the C, which is the third note of the chord, or the third interval from that root note of the chord. So the first, the third, and the fifth of either the chord you're working in or the scale itself will generally be a really strong note to hit in your melody. So let's have a look at that across the other two melodies as well. So we've got Viva La Vida. Let's open up the melody. Now let's select the chords and the melody. And this is a couple of octaves above, so it's a bit harder to see. And we've actually used some chord inversions, which means we're just changing the order of the notes within the chords, but they're the same notes within each chord. But if I put this melody down an octave, or 2 octaves actually, we can see that's the first note of the first chord, that's the third note, and we can see we're hitting that A straight away. For the second chord, we're hitting the G, then we're moving to the E and the F. Okay, so the E is not in that chord, but the F is. And then for the third part of the melody, we're hitting the G, which is again part of the chord if we move it up. So we can see how much the chords and the melodies hit the same notes. Again, this can make things really melodically strong. And finally, let's look at levels and see if it still applies. So we'll open up the melody, then we will select the chords as well. And we can see straight away, if we put the melody down an octave, like so, boom. It's sharing so many of the same notes from those chords, it's almost guaranteed to be strong. Okay, so now I want us to build our own melody from scratch using these things that we found out from analyzing these 3 melodies. But first I need to put my headphones on. Come on, headphones. Come on. You should have done this earlier, Will. Come on. Organisation, eh? Okay, let's do it. So I've got a normal grand piano. I've chosen A minor as our scale. That's the first thing we need to do. And I'm really quickly going to draw out some chords because that's going to give the underpinning. And remember, we can use some of those chord notes as well for our melody. So I'm going to just do it by ear. And that. Okay, that sounds pretty good to me. Let's just repeat that. And I'm starting on the root note of the track, which is the A. You don't have to do that, but it's going to sound pretty strong. So we've got this as our bass notes. And a real quick tip, you can see for the second and the fourth bass note, I've actually moved them 1/8 before the beat to get that groove moving forwards. And that was actually in a lot of the examples we just looked at as well. So now let's build out these chords. If you've got scale mode selected like so, which most DAWs have nowadays, you can just skip a note each time, and that's going to build our standard triads of each chord like so. Let's do that for the other chords. So our standard triads sound like this. I'm just going to spice them up a bit by adding a couple of sevenths. So count up to the 7th, and it's called the 7th because you've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 scale positions above the root of the chord. Let's add the other ones. Lovely. Okay, so now let's write that melody in. Remember, we're going to just tap out the rhythm first using the root note. So the root note is the A because we're in the scale of A minor. So I just want something that grooves well with the other elements in my track, be that drums that you're starting with, or the chord progression, or if you're just starting from scratch. That sounds cool, so I'm just going to repeat that. Remember the repetition of rhythm, the rhythmic motif. And then this is where we spice things up at the end of the melody. Remember the hero's journey. So now we are going to go on to adjusting the pitch, using those 4 secrets we just uncovered. So we are going stepwise up and down. And then let's repeat that pitch motif as well. So we're repeating the rhythm motif and the pitch motif, and we've thrown in a little leapwise interval from the E up to the B, just to excite things a little bit. So now let's repeat that motif. And we could extend this over twice as long, our progression, if we want, but I want to get it all done within these 8 bars. So we're going to go up here, remember our hero's journey, before resolving back down for the resolution. And then we're going back, so it's going to lead perfectly round to the beginning of the melody. So let's have a listen to it now. Cool, I really like that, and it adheres to everything that we've touched upon. We've got rhythmic motif, we've got pitch motif repetition, we've got everything happening within just over 1 octave. We've got the hero's journey, and we've got mostly stepwise with a couple of leapwise thrown in just to keep things exciting. So let's put those away. The tip I wanted to share with you, if you don't know any music theory and you're not good on the piano or the piano roll editor, is simply just to hum or sing a melody as you're listening to a chord progression. Now you can record it into your DAW using a microphone. It doesn't have to be perfect, and then you can use that as a template to trace out the MIDI notes so you get it into your piano roll editor. And in Ableton at least, you can right click and convert your sung melody into MIDI notes. I find it's not that accurate, so I prefer to do it manually, but the option is there if you want it. Now I wanted to throw in this little bonus bit because as we've transposed all of these melodies and chord progressions to the same key, I want to give you a little example of what we can do if we use the melody from one track but then bring in the chords from another. So instead of using the chords from Blinding Lights, let's bring in the chords from Viva La Vida, but with the Blinding Lights melody. Ah, that sounds really cool. And now let's try it with levels. Nice. As you can tell, the chord progression plays a huge part in contextualizing the melody, and if you change the chord progression, it can completely throw your melodic idea off. So I've put together in this video how to create an interesting chord progression from scratch that's going to work perfectly with your melody. But before you head over there, if you did find this useful, please like and consider subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you over at that next video where we're going to nail your chord progressions.